Welcome to In Her Voice. My name is Kelly Covert, and I am passionate about helping women live authentically by listening to their inner voice. Get ready to be inspired by women of all walks of life that have set aside their should-bes and not good enoughs and are standing in their true voice, the voice of wisdom that each and every one of us has inside. Hello, everyone. This is Kelly Covert, and you are listening to In Her Voice. And I am so excited that you press play today because this interview that I have with Dr. Melody Moore of the Embody Love Movement is going to change your world. I'm not kidding you. This is amazing stuff. We dig into this idea of fierce self-love. And I feel like I need to listen to this 10 times in a row and take notes. Seriously, like if you're listening to it in the car, listen. And when you get home, listen again with a pen and your journal because there are so many amazing takeaways in here. I can't even. Right now, you guys, I just listened to it again before I did this intro, and it's so good. So let me tell you about Dr. Melody Moore. Melody Moore is a social entrepreneur, a licensed clinical psychologist, yoga teacher, author, and speaker. She is the founder of the Embody Love Movement Foundation, a nonprofit whose mission is to empower girls and women to celebrate their inner beauty, commit to kindness, and contribute to meaningful change in the world. Dr. Moore's work has been featured in the books Yoga and Body Image and Yoga and Eating Disorders, Ancient Healing for Modern Illness, as well as National Geographic Magazine, Yoga Journal, Yoga International, Mantra, Elephant Journal, and Origin Magazine. She created the Collegiate Body Image 3D program for Delta 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 and is their subject matter expert on self-love and body acceptance. She is a National Eating Disorder Association's advice columnist, an advisor for World Muse, and a faculty member for Off the Mat Into the World, a social profit that empowers leaders to become conscious activists. In 2015, she was featured as one of 10 game changers by Yoga Journal and chosen as one of 100 most influential global leaders empowering women worldwide by EBW 2020. She's legit, y'all, and you will understand why when you hear her words. So stop what you're doing, be all in, pay attention, take notes, because Dr. Melody Moore has amazing things to share with you today on self-love. Here we go. Dr. Melody Moore, thank you so much for being here with us today on the In Her Voice podcast. How are you?
I'm doing so well. I'm grateful to be here. I love the name of this podcast.
Thank you. It came to me in a flash of light. And so I took it. So I want to dive right in. I already read your bio, but I want to give you an opportunity to share with the listeners a little bit about your story, how you came to create the Embody Love movement, and also what your journey has been like to that place.
I'll try to be potent. Thank you for the question. I feel like most girls and most women, I was raised in this culture and underneath this paradigm of there being a very narrow, idealized version of beauty that was the only one that equaled worthiness and that equaled happiness. And in particular, in my family system and my family of origin, had a very physically attractive, very physically thin, underweight even mom who was praised for the way that she looked. And so as her daughter, I picked up what wasn't true. I picked up the messaging that what mattered about her to other people and what was approvable about her to others was her size, her thinness, and her beauty. And despite the fact that my mom had generosity and had wisdom and had kindness and had all kinds of other things that were impacting the world around her, those weren't mentioned. Those weren't considered, at least not in the perspective of me as her daughter. And so I felt like the way in which she was seen and celebrated and the way in which she saw and celebrated herself had everything to do with appearance and nothing to do with soul. And I took that on as being what would also define me as a human and what would also define me as worthy and as approvable or not. So I developed, I'll call it a self-hatred, a really negative body image, and a sense of self that was based on things that really don't matter and aren't truthful. I started eating at my mom, emotionally eating, creating a protective barrier around myself, carrying my soul inside of a body that wasn't really being treated with respect or kindness, but with hatred and separation. So it's a little bit surprising to jump forward away from my family of origin into my work as a psychologist, because as I was in graduate school doing training, I wanted to work with adolescents. I just had a heart for teens. I think part of it was out of my own insecurity. I was so young. I was in my young 20s when I started my PhD program in clinical psychology. And I feel like I probably then didn't have the confidence to work with adults, knowing my own just naivete and lack of sophistication in life. And so requested to work with adolescents. And as divine source would have directed it, I was placed in an eating disorder treatment center for kids, Children's Medical Center for Pediatric Eating Disorders. And everything in me was like, no, I did not want to do that work. I did not want to work with that population. My mom and my older sister both suffered from anorexia nervosa. I wanted nothing to do with it. And yet it was my dharma. It was my destiny. I had to be there and I had to work with those folks. And as I allowed myself the privilege and really the honor of hearing the stories and of co-narrating journeys toward self-acceptance and toward thriving for the clients I was working with, something was happening within me too. My own healing was taking place in a way that I hadn't anticipated. In part from doing that work, in part from being in my own therapy, and in part from being on my own yoga mat for many years. And so there was this combination of mind-body integration for me through the yoga practice, and this healing of being in service and of seeing all sides of the impact of negative body image, negative self-image ultimately, which is what negative body image is about, and eating disorders. And so through my own healing, I came to become, I think, an effective therapist for people struggling with negative body image and eating disorders, particularly for young women. And so I had a group of young women some of whom had been hospitalized for their various eating disorders. Some of them had not. They were just outpatient clients. But I had them in a therapy group. And I believe so strongly in the medium of healing that is group therapy. I had them in a therapy group on Wednesday nights for many years. They started in 8th, 9th, and 10th grades. And by the time that the youngest who had started in 8th grade were graduating from high school, so 4 years later, these same 6 young women were still in a therapy group, I knew that they had something particularly awesome to offer the world around them. And I wanted to find a way as their therapist to get them out of therapy, but also to arm them with something that would prevent them from relapsing into disordered eating or into negative body image, into self-worthlessness. And so Embody Love Movement was really born out of that desire. I created and offered that group of girls a curriculum that combines commitment to kindness to self and an availability to change perception from criticism to kindness, from comparison to celebration of all of us. And I offered it. It's a 3-hour curriculum to that group of girls who I had known then for 4 or 5 years. And what I hoped would happen did happen. They elected to exit therapy and to enter into a collaboration with each other where they would go out and offer workshops, these transformational workshops of Embody Love Movement, to other girls and other women in their college campuses, in their high schools, and in junior highs and camps that they had been to in the past. And so the original, I call them the warriors, came from really phoenixes, these rising goddesses that had themselves suffered, and that through their suffering had come to be fierce in their self-love and in their commitment to recognizing that each of them had something specific and necessary to offer to the world outside and around them. And a Body Love movement has grown from that seed of empowerment and of preventing other girls and women from suffering in the same way that they had.
What a wonderful story. I love that. And I love this idea of being fierce in our self-love. Can you tell us what you mean by that? I mean, what does fierce self-love look like and feel like?
Fierce, right? The image that comes to mind is Kali, this Hindu goddess Kali that's fierce. I just feel like self-love is difficult. It's no joke. It's not a platitude, and it's not something that we can just turn a light switch and like, okay, now I love myself after however many years and layers and internal negative voices each of us have for all the reasons we have of surviving life by developing those. In order to turn all of that around, in order to reframe the way that we see and we treat ourselves and therefore other people, I believe that there has to be a fierceness, a veracity, a consistency in our commitment and a reliability within us that we are going to again and again and again come back to kindness and come back to compassion, come back to gentleness and to tenderness, and use all the tools available for us to be able to keep seeing in every moment again and again that we are doing our best with the resources that we have available and with the level of awareness that we have available. And that in so doing, we offer ourselves forgiveness. We offer ourselves the present moment, which is the only moment in which we have power. And we offer ourselves the chance to keep coming back to the truth of who we are and to keep muting out and disempowering voices, images, situations, others, internal voices or external ones that would become obstacle to our own faith and trust in ourselves that we are enough and that we are worthy.
Oh, I feel like I could just listen to you talk and talk and talk. Do you need me to ask questions?
Yes. Thank you.
I will, don't worry. The image that I got when you talked about that is almost like we're going into battle, and the things that we gird ourselves with, like our weapons that we pick up, are positive self-talk, our gratitude, are this idea that we have to mute out, like you said, that negative self-talk and the things that come up that want to take us back down that road. So this fierce battle, let's gird ourselves up. And then second to that is this idea that it's a practice that we do over and over and over again. And I'd love to know where you are in your own practice of self-love. What does your practice look like?
That's a wonderful question. Thanks for asking that. As you were talking about girding ourselves for battle, I was remembering watching Wonder Woman earlier this year, and just so appreciating the sisterhood that came with that capacity. I think we leave that out far too often.
Yeah, because we can really lean on each other and use that. If someone is feeling weak on a particular day, we can hold her up with self-love too.
That's right. And it's not only contagious, but it's a natural outgrowth of the way in which we feel about ourselves impacts those around us. And the more loving I am toward myself, the more I can fall in love with and appreciate myself, the more you're going to love you in my presence. And we sometimes fear that it's going to work the opposite way, right? But there's that beautiful Marianne Williamson quote, that well-known quote, our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate, it's that we are powerful beyond measure. And she goes on to talk about how when we allow our own light to shine, others are able to do so in our presence. How dare we not, is how I think about it. So that idea of we need each other, we can support each other, we can lift each other up. Just like if we don't do so, we necessarily pull each other down. So I do feel like kindness is the antidote to comparison, that celebration of one another. But to answer your question about my own self-love practice, I do feel in love with myself, and I love being able to say that and to claim it, because I hope that it offers and instills hope. And being in love with myself does not mean that I feel perfect. I don't feel like perfection exists except for in divine form, which is certainly not. But I feel like there's a way of loving. I know, I experience, there's a way of loving myself and appreciating myself, inclusive of all the crap, all the darkness, all the capacity that I have and that sometimes comes to fruition that's might be perceived as negative, that it's all in here. It's all part of it. Every part of my past, all the things that I've done that have caused harm to myself or to others that I have previously felt shame over, that's all part of an integrated whole that I've become. And I no longer feel like I'm waiting on some idealized version of myself, be it in body form or physical form or mental or emotional form, to be in love with myself. I'm not caught up in that trap of when I X, right? When I achieve whatever it might be, right, then I'm lovable or then I'm worthy. It's like, no, it's actually right now, this present moment here now, I can see I'm everything I need to be. I have enough. I am enough. And worthiness is already within me. It's already accessible. It's not something that I need to earn by looking a certain way or being a certain way or doing certain things. It just is. Mm. And so the practice to me is into the acceptance of what's already all of our birthright, mine too. And I feel like saying all of our and mine too, just to point out that I know in my own experience and in my own heart, I know that self-love has everything to do with understanding I am not more worthy or more approvable or more lovable than anyone else on earth. And I am not less worthy or less approvable than anyone else on earth. And I think in that understanding and that recognition and that knowing, it's a lot easier to fall in love with ourselves when we don't see it as being better than or other than anyone else.
Right. Because as girls, I think so often we're taught, don't brag, don't be more than who you are because you're going to make people feel bad. And when we go into this discussion of worthiness, I think some of that stuff tends to come up. And so I love the way you describe that. Like we're all the same, like collectively.
That's right. And it's across, philosophies. There's a Native American saying, there are no others. There's a saying in South Africa, Ubuntu, I am because you are. And in yoga, we believe there is no separation. There is no separation between you and I. So that means inherently, right, we all have the same birthright and access to love, to unconditional love.
Yeah. I recently read The Book of Joy by the Dalai Lama. And yes, so good. I highly recommend it. And I felt like that was a theme, like this collective humanity. We're all in it together. So I just really love that. Speaking of yoga, you mentioned that you really feel like yoga was an integral part of your healing. Can you talk to us what you learned through yoga and how that plays into your self-love?
Absolutely. I love to talk about yoga. And what I mean by yoga, to set a context, is an it's called eight-limbed path. And one of those limbs, the third, is asana. So that's the yoga practice that a lot of people in America, at least, think of yoga as being shapes that we make with our bodies, movements on a 2x6 sticky mat. And that's true. That's part of it, but it's not the most important part of it. In fact, for yogis, those shapes that we make with our bodies are ways to settle our minds into meditation. And so both have been impactful to me for sure, but I do like to name that because I'm talking about a way of perceiving things like union, things like non-separation. So for me, being a yoga practitioner has allowed me to become more present, more available to see my body as the carrier for my soul, and to use my body in devotion, so that when I practice those shapes that yoga practice, it feels like a prayer. It feels like an offering instead of feeling like a performance or like posing. And it's one of the things that separates yoga from other calisthenics, is that in this practice in particular, it's not about how you look doing it. It's about how you feel inside while being present to the breath in the practice. And so it links mind and body in that way through a spiritual lens. And so differently than any other sort of sport or athletic endeavor. Not that there's anything wrong with those, but that's what separates yoga from them, is that it's really about feeling and not about doing. And wow, for me, for somebody who's type A and perfectionistic and super self-critical, when I started the practice, that's been such a gift, that to learn how to let go of all of those external bars of enoughness and find instead the reliability of an internal knowing and wisdom and trusting that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny that you say that about being a perfectionist. All of my listeners know I am a self-declared recovering perfectionist. And I talk a lot about this on the podcast, but I remember when I first started doing yoga, I was all like the power yoga, like I'm only going to take a power yoga class. And then the, 3 short minutes in Savasana meditation at the end would drive me crazy. And I felt like I wasn't getting it. Like I wasn't, like you say, integrating that mind and body. It was just about movement. So I appreciate your explanation of that. And it reminds me of someone, I have a friend who's a yogi, and she once said to me, sometimes your yoga practice is just laying on the mat and breathing. And I think that we need to get back to that more. Don't you think?
Absolutely. And that's the difficult part. Like you said, you wanted to run out of the room in Shavasana, right? Because sometimes, which is for those who don't practice yoga who are listening, that's where you're laying on the mat and breathing. Right. At the end, the pose is literally, it translates to corpse pose, preparation for death. Not meaning literal death necessarily, but meaning loss. What happens when we let go? What happens when we surrender? What are we left with when we're not performing and perfecting, right, and posing? Then we're left with ourselves. Then we really have an opportunity to greet ourselves and to reflect on who we are. So absolutely, I feel like it's necessary that we learn to be with ourselves. And how could we possibly learn to love ourselves if we can't even be with ourselves, if we can't tolerate ourselves? Another piece of being a yogi and another part of the yoga practice is meditation. And to me, speaking earlier about the negative and critical voices, the way for me that I've been able to separate from them and take the power out of them is through a meditation practice that allows those thoughts that come up to be held out. There's space between my mind and the thought. And so I can then make a choice about whether or not I want to dive into that thought and blow it up and let it become a reality that impacts my behavior, that impacts my opinion of myself, versus see it as, there's an option over there. Look at that thing trying to attack me from way out there in the distance. I can allow that to roll off. I don't have to jump into it. And the meditation practice to me is the thing that allows diffusion of mind and thought in a way that creates so much personal empowerment about choice of how I'm going to perceive myself and the world.
So if you are going to sit down with a group of women like I used to be, I'm not like that anymore, thank goodness. But like I used to be, type A, perfectionist, always trying, doing. How do you teach them to be okay with themselves?
It's not easy, is it?
No.
It's not easy, is it? You're right. Like, how do we gird ourselves with all these different kinds of tools? One thing I would want to do with that group of women is get them on a mat and give them the embodied experience of what it's like to feel okay not doing, which sometimes means, especially at first when there's so much layer, residue of years and years and years of built up belief, false belief that I have to do. Like, all right, let's do it out and wring it out and release that tension in order to have a moment of silence and of stillness to see, like, here's where the juice is, here's where the capacity is, here's where the creativity is. You know, that moment where you said this idea came to me and I collaborated with it, which reminded me of Elizabeth Gilbert's book about big magic, right? Like the ideas, the brilliance comes to us in stillness and in silence. It never comes in the doing. We're too busy in the doing, right? To really allow to have those creative bursts of geniuses arrive for us. So what I do with groups of women often, and what the Embodied Love Movement program is one of the main pieces is, how can we take the shame away? How can we deprogram the deep shame that most of us raised in first world countries, including the United States, feel just about being who we are? And part of doing that for me in groups of women, which again I think is so powerful, is allowing everyone to see that they're in the same boat together. They're all in this together. No one's alone in their sense of not enoughness, and no one's alone in their sense of separation and a sense of shame. And so sometimes it's just helpful to see there's this shared empathy and the shared connection of like, oh, me too. I thought I was so alone in that. You also beat yourself up over the way that you look, or not being a good enough mom, or not getting it all done, or not taking care of everything. And so coming from this place of connection and vulnerability around that allows us to start to sift through what's really not useful about the messaging that we're receiving from the media that we've ingested and therefore take in and take on, and then continue to filter out in really insidious ways to those around us and get them collectively to see, I not only owe this to myself, I really owe it to you too, to be more gentle and more compassionate and more tender with myself, because it will also impact the rest of you.
Yeah. You know, for me, a big turning point in my life was when I started to realize that the way I judge other people is exact reflection of the way I judge myself. And it was in that moment when I was recognizing these thoughts that I would not share with anybody, but that I think them. And I was thinking them not only about someone else, but about myself, that it really hit me like, I'm more than this. And I can choose, like you said, we don't have to believe them. We don't have to take those thoughts as truth.
Right. Yeah, and there is a direct correlation. I see minds as almost like two-way mirrors. You know, as a therapist in training, we would have to see clients in one room with the supervisor watching from outside. It looks like a window, but it's a mirror. Right. I feel like minds really work that way too, how it is a direct reflection of how we perceive ourselves, that we perceive other people. And I remember when I had serious negative body image and very low self-worth, noticing things on other women, noticing their size, noticing differences, like noticing that someone had lost or gained weight, for example, or noticing the way that someone looked in particular outfits, things like that, because I was so concerned in these micro changes in my own body, and I was so wrapped up in my own negative evaluation that I was also perceiving and judging, criticizing other women based on those same factors. And now that I accept my body, now that I have more self-acceptance in general, now that I allow grace to really be the lens through which I see even my past behaviors, which have not been perfect by any means, I know that I'm so much more compassionate with those around me. I don't notice things about other women's bodies in the way that I used to, because I'm not so internally critical and beating up and demeaning myself and really obliterating my effort to do whatever in the world. Because I'm not doing that to me, I'm not doing it to those around me either. And I feel like it's a felt experience. I know that it is, because I've had enough women, enough friends, enough students tell me, I feel good about myself when I'm around you. And I'm like, awesome. I want nothing more than that. And I know that comes from me feeling good about myself.
Oh my gosh. It's a direct correlation, right? The more kind we are to ourselves, the more ability we have to be kind to others. And then it just keeps feeding. So I think it's so important to really take that as, I don't know, I want to say Bible. Like, this is truth, you guys. This is not something to think about and consider.
Right.
This is truth. You mentioned something about your self-worth. And when I was reading your blog on your about page on your website, which I'll share in the show notes with everyone, there was a sentence that really struck me. And you said that you outsourced your self-worth. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, what I meant by that is I was relying on people outside of me to determine for me how to feel about myself, right? If I got the attention of the romantic partner that I wanted, then I was lovable. If I was told that I was offered the position at work or the raise, then I was approvable. If I was told by other people I was, thin enough or beautiful enough, then I was worthy. Outsourcing, outsourcing meaning giving away the power, instead of being empowered from within, giving it away and saying, you let me know if I'm good enough. You world, or you person, you man, you woman, right? Mm-hmm. You client, you boss, whatever. And there is a black hole when it comes to outsourcing self-worth. It will never be enough. As long as any of us are waiting on somebody else to approve of who we are, or relying on the acceptance of someone or a group of others, whomever, to tell us that we are worthy of love, we'll never feel lovable. Because it can't come from the outside. I mean, it's wonderful to hear those things, and sure, it feels great. I'm not denying that. To have somebody else admire us or be attracted to us or approve of us or appreciate us, all of those things are awesome. But they're icing on the cake, and they would fall into a file that's not available if we don't have a source from within that says to us internally from our own sense of self, I am enough. There's nothing about me that needs to change in order for me to be worthy of love.
It's so true. And thank you for sharing that. I've never heard it said quite like that. And I feel like it's really powerful to think of how much we're giving that away. We're giving away that power when it's really right inside of us. So, Melody, this is so wonderful. Can you please let my listeners know where they can find you online?
I would love to. My website is drmelodymore.com. It's drmelodymore.com. And the nonprofit I started, Embody Love Movement, is that, embodylovemovement.org. There's also a link to that site from drmelodymore.com as well. So I'd love to stay connected with you. I have yoga classes, meditation classes online, and all kinds of retreats and workshops around the country and world. So I'd love to meet anyone in person.
Awesome. And I'm excited that an Embody Love Movement day, yoga day, or whatever, an event is going to be here in Syracuse in October. And I will definitely put details on the show notes page for those of you who are local to hear, because I'm going to be there.
Awesome. Beautiful.
Yeah,
yes. One Love Fits All will be in Syracuse. It'll be an amazing yoga flow. So I hope folks are listening and will join you and just be blessed by being a part of that day.
I'm sure. I can't wait. I'm so looking forward to it. So I have one more question for you. In your life right now, what is your inner voice saying to you?
Write a book.
You were not the first person who has said that. There's really? A lot of writing books happening.
Write it's like the voice that I don't want to hear.
Like, really? Is that really what you want me to do?
Yes, but the guidance it could not be more clear. And the way this works in my life, and I'm sure this is true for you and many of your listeners, so I'll name it, is people and supporters and angels are showing up in kind of this like, you have everything that you need. Everything is available that you need, including, a publisher coming to me and saying, please write a book. There's no denying that this is what needs to come from divine through me next. So
yeah, well, that's exciting. And I can't wait to read it.
Thank you. I can't wait to write it, but
and I wish you blessings and luck and grace as you do that. So, Melody, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you for what you are bringing into this world. Your worth, your gifts, your amazing light. Thank you for sharing that with us today, and thank you for being you.
Thank you so much for saying so. I really appreciate that. I put my hand on my heart so I could take it in and rub it in. Thank you, Kelly. It's wonderful to be with you.
I feel like we should all just have a moment of silence for the deep and powerful wisdom that Melody just shared with us. Like, seriously, so good. It was so good. And this is the third interview in my month of celebrating Love Your Body Month with Ophelia's Place and Circles of Change. And all of us can celebrate this. This is more than just about loving our physical body. This is about practicing the fierce self-love that Dr. Melody shared with us. Fierce, like put on your armor self-love, and we can practice it together. I loved what she said about sisterhood, right? We don't have to be by ourselves when we're practicing this. We can practice this together. We can support each other together. When we practice self-love, all of the people around us love themselves more. Oh, it's so good. So good, you guys. So I really hope that you loved this interview. And you know what? If you really had some aha moments while you were listening to this, can you please let me know? Shoot me an email at kelly@kellycovert.com or tag me on Instagram or Facebook. Let me know what your big takeaway was from this episode, because I would love to hear it. I just feel like there was so much good stuff in this. And I also want to remind you that this month, in collaboration with Ophelia's Place and Circles of Change, we are celebrating Love Your Body Month. I know I said that already once during this outro, but I want to remind you again that I am donating 50% of my Patreon donations to Circles of Change this month, and you can be a part of that. You can support In Her Voice and Circles of Change. That is an organization that's empowering women to love themselves right now. And you can do that. We can do it together. So if you want to become a part of my circle and be supporting of me and In Her Voice and Ophelia's Place and Circles of Change, please head on over to kellycovert.com/together. And you can make a donation there. Even a donation as small as $1 is so welcome. And I'm so grateful for that. So if you're feeling that tug on your heart, please listen and head on over to kellycovert.com/together so we can be a part of changing the world together. And you know that you can change the world, right? Right? Yes, you can. When you change your world, you're changing the world. And it's important for us to recognize that we have this power. It is deep inside of us. There is a well of wisdom within each and every one of us that can show us the way, that can show us what our gifts are, what our talents are, and show us that we are worthy enough to use them. So don't forget it, you guys. You are worthy.